Dark Messiah of Might and Magic is like a high school locker room before phys ed, but with wizards, orcs and goblins instead of nerds and jocks. But unlike a normal high school, there are no nerds here. Everybody's a 6-foot tall jock who'll stomp you to death instead of giving you a wedgie. This analogy is more appropriate than you might think, because Dark Messiah of Might and Magic feels like it comes from Arcane's adolescence, as Chris Turnston from PC Gamer put it. While Arx Fatalis was a game Arcane felt they needed to make to honor their immersive sim mentors, Dark Messiah is the game they wanted to make. A bombastic, unapologetic murder simulator that pulls no punches. The story is weak, the writing is nothing special, but hey, who the fuck needs a good story when you can do this? Dark Messiah takes place in a rebooted version of the Might and Magic universe. And don't worry, you don't need to know anything about Might and Magic to understand this game, trust me on this. Dark Messiah is to Might and Magic what Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is to Metal Gear Solid. A deadbeat cousin who comes crawling out of the woodwork to beg his family for money and gets into the occasional parking lot fight. I should really stop making these analogies. So anyway, Dark Messiah puts you into the shoes of Sareth, the apprentice of a powerful wizard. Right from the very start, you'll notice that this isn't your typical fantasy story. I mean, it is generic to some degree, but just listen to how it's presented.
You have all that you need to achieve your destiny. But you won't achieve it here. Your future is out there, in a distant land. I'm sending you to the free city of Stonehelm to meet a wizard named Menelag. He and I have certain mutual interests.
Yeah, this gives me more of a heist movie vibe. This is what a fantasy movie directed by Guy Ritchie would look like. Dark Messiah of Might and Magic? More like Dark Messiah of Two Smoking Barrels. Or Snatch.
Do you know what Nemesis means?
Here's another thing that makes Dark Messiah stand out from other fantasy games. The tutorial. It teaches you basic gameplay mechanics and controls until...
The rope, Sabbath. Cut the rope. Kick that creature back and watch it fall.
Use the spikes to your advantage. Kick him. If he's still moving, drive your sword through him.
It finally hits you. You're not a fantasy hero. You're not an honorable knight. You're Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. And that's about all the context you need. Apart from the Guy Ritchie style story presentation, there's nothing to rave about. I've said before that main stories are not Arcane's strong point, and Dark Messiah is no exception. I really hope they'll solve this in Deathloop. The main character Sareth is painfully bland. He doesn't really have anything interesting to say despite being possessed by a succubus. And I don't know about you, but if I had a succubus horning out inside my head, I'd have something to say about that. In terms of presentation, Dark Messiah looks pretty good for a 14-year-old game. The textures might look dated, but the light effects do a great job of masking them. Sadly, Dark Messiah lacks that trademark Arcane Studios visual flair and creativity of something like Dishonored or even Arx Fatalis. Don't expect any weird technologies or creative architecture. As far as fantasy settings go, Dark Messiah is pretty generic. The first maybe quarter of Dark Messiah takes place in medieval keeps and towns, so pretty standard stuff. Thankfully, the game then goes straight into Indiana Jones territory by dropping you into this huge, insanely creative multi-level temple. Visually speaking, this is arguably the high point of the game simply due to how diverse it is. There's always something pretty to look at. After this, unfortunately, the game literally suffers a sharp drop by taking you to these damp crypts that are so dark and populated with enemies that you barely have any time to admire the visuals. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that Dark Messiah's visuals are entirely devoid of any creativity. It's just that after playing 4 Arcane games in a row, I've come to expect more from them. The absence of art directors like Sébastien Mitton and Victor Antonov is quite noticeable. I know it's not fair to judge Dark Messiah retroactively based on Arcane's subsequent games, but come on, look me in the eye and tell me that you'd be okay with going from the Boyle Mansion to this. It's like going back to CSI after watching The Wire. Your expectations will never be the same. On the plus side, the sound design is incredible. Dark Messiah knows when it's time to take a step back and let you soak in the atmosphere. For an over-the-top non-stop murder simulator, Dark Messiah can get pretty moody. The weapons also sound just right, and I love the little details, like how the kick sounds differently depending on what type of armor the enemy is wearing. Oh, and speaking of kicking enemies, I think it's high time we talked about the gameplay. So at its core, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic is an RPG. You earn skill points for accomplishing various objectives. Skills are split into 3 categories: fighting, magic, and miscellaneous. Each of these has sub-branches and some skills have ranks. The game has a runtime of about 10 hours, so you won't see everything in your first playthrough. Some skills, like lockpicking, require a staggering 8 skill points, and that without accounting for the ones you have to spend to get there. Thankfully, lockpicking is not essential. The designers were careful enough as to not skill gate useful items. What you'll want to pay attention to are magic and combat skills. The magic in this game feels great. There's a decent variety of spells, both offensive and defensive, but we'll get back to them later in the video. The combat tree improves the damage output of physical attacks. Advanced weapons typically have skill requirements, so you'll want to decide early on which tree you want to focus on. As far as melee weapons go, you have a pretty good variety, from swords, staffs, daggers, axes, and so on and so forth. It's worth mentioning that staffs barely deal any damage, but they're good for crowd control. Daggers, on the other hand, are useful regardless of your build. You can find the lightning daggers very early in the campaign and you can beat the game with them. They deal plus 8 damage to creatures vulnerable to lightning, such as orcs and goblins, and trust me, you'll see a lot of them.
On you, coward!
Investing skill points into the melee tree grants access to special attacks. You can combine these with other attacks, like stunning an enemy and disarming them. Sounds pretty easy, right? Well, not exactly. Enemies are generally difficult to kill in straightforward combat. You can't spam attacks, as the enemies will simply parry them and kill you in a few hits. Parrying and charging up heavy attacks works in some encounters, but enemies in this game are super fast and close the gap very quickly. As great as it feels, sword fighting is just a means to an end. Remember the tutorial?
Adapt. Kick that creature back and watch it fall.
Dark Messiah is a drunken parking lot fight of a game. Enemies have high health and damage outputs, so players are incentivized to look for creative ways to dispose of their foes in the heat of battle. What I like about the environmental combat is how it complements the sword fighting and spellcasting instead of replacing it. Yeah, you could impale orcs with your sword, but why do that when there's a perfectly cuttable rope that releases heavy objects on them? Why put those sword fighting lessons to use when you can just throw barrels and shit? You know that old saying, right? The barrel is mightier than the sword? Or something like that. And why try to have an honest fight when you can just kick enemies over a cliff? The environment is full of things you could use to your advantage. Kick enemies into fire, lure orcs into giant battering rams. Ever wanted to start a goblin insurrection? Well, the game lets you do just that. I decided to go the extra mile and purge the revolutionaries. You know, just to be safe. I hate goblins, man. Most of the traps and hazards are scripted, but there's some emergent stuff too. For example, I was fighting a few goons in an attic when, for some reason, the floor collapsed from under us and they fell to their death. Neat. This takes us to the spells and physics engine. What do spells have to do with the physics engine? I'm glad you asked. Let's take the freeze spell. Now, you can use it to stun enemies like a normal person, or do something more creative with it.
Human!
Get out of my way!
The telekinesis spell is by far my favorite because it relies entirely on using the environment. Hurling forks and vases with the power of your brain is never not fun. Whether you're flying giant spiders with a fireball or zapping zombies in a crypt, the magic feels great. And the way spells interact with the environments encourages a lot of different playstyles. Now, despite being linear, Dark Messiah lets players stray off from the beaten path. Health and mana potions, weapons and supplies all need to be found. There are no vendors and merchants in Dark Messiah. You'll have to rely on smashing supply crates and searching every nook and cranny for items. Speaking of which, if you like finding secrets, you'll get a kick out of Dark Messiah. You can find some pretty powerful items in these rooms. Sometimes you're rewarded with skill points when you find an area. There's even a dedicated skill that highlights secret switches, which is a great incentive to poke around a little. You might not want to poke around too much though. Some secrets aren't even marked as secrets. You can find stuff in the unlikeliest of places. One time I was trying to find my way to the next objective when I noticed this katana planted in the wall. No matter how you reach a secret area, you're always rewarded with something good. Except this one. Really, you made me go through all that trouble for a few fucking scrolls? As a quick side note, I really have to talk about how similar Dark Messiah is to Dishonored in the small details. Somebody at Arcane must have written a 500-page manifesto detailing how certain animations and mission transitions should look like because, man, the sheer number of recycled assets is just staggering.
I've waited for this. Let's see if the outside.
The temple is riddled with their tunnels. Sadly, their hate is justified.
This is the Hound Pit's pub. Closed for business. Half the district marked off as dead from the plague.
Now, the game does have some problems, mainly the health system and some other little bugs, but other than that it's pretty solid. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. For a 10-hour linear game, it's surprisingly layered and replayable. I could see myself revisiting Dark Messiah in my off time and playing it with a different build. Stomping orcs and goblins to death never loses its luster.
Orc only had one liver. I think you eat there of something else.
Thanks for watching. In case you're wondering, no, I'm not gonna review Dishonored 2 in my next video. That game runs like shit on my laptop. It's one of the most badly optimized games I've ever played, which is quite a shame. So I'm pretty much done with Arcane games for the time being. It's been a wild ride, man. I never intended to do an Arcanathon or however you want to call it, it just came naturally. And in case you haven't noticed, I fucking adore this studio, so playing their games back to back and noticing all the connective tissues and how they iterated on certain mechanics and stuff was really fun. I might do this with other studios, like I'd love to play all the Deus Ex games back to back, but that's a lot of work and dedication that I don't think I have the energy for right now. I've been busy as hell with my new day job, and by the way, sorry, there's a car passing by, there's nothing I can do about that. I guess that's, you know, unscripted talking for you. So yeah, my new day job. And it will only get crazier as time goes on, so I don't know if I'll be physically capable of maintaining my 2-week upload cycle. Like, this video will be a week late, I think. And I try not to put pressure on myself and not feel bad for the occasional break and do, you know, human stuff like sleeping maybe, ordering a pizza, watching Jersey Shore, but I don't know. Basically all I do now is ensure that I have a fucking roof over my head during the day and work on my channel when I get home. And by the way, I know my situation isn't unique. In fact, I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of content creators in this exact situation. Anyway, sorry for getting so personal out of the blue, but there's like 300 of you right now, so I felt I owed you an explanation for what's going on right now. And I just realized that this is my 20th video, and my last, I guess you can call it, life update happened in the 10th video. That's weird. Maybe I'll make this a thing. Every 10th video I get to complain about my life. Yeah, that sounds about right. So anyway, that's it for today. Thanks again for watching, and as always, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And also, you know, share this video with your friends and on social media and stuff. And yeah, that's it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.